They say to help your shots look better, you should have like a fog machine or something. Putting particulates into the air adds depth of field. It's a good idea. It's a shame I don't have a fog machine though. Hello everyone, and welcome to a contemplative episode of Gothic Gardening. Today we're going to be discussing tool maintenance in a way, by which I'm referring to sharpening your sickle. I only have one sickle. I do plan on eventually getting more of these, so I will show you how to sharpen using this one, but I'm going to need more practice at actually sharpening. And actually, if you do decide to start learning how to sharpen your tools or whatnot, it doesn't hurt to get as much practice as you can. So what I'm actually going to do in this episode is demonstrate the sharpening technique for the sickle, but also I'm going to, while I'm at it, go ahead and sharpen a bunch of our knives from the kitchen, because we have not done anything sharpening wise with them for years, and whew, they are rough. In order to sharpen a tool or whatnot, you first need a whetstone. Here's a whetstone that I prepared earlier. What you have to do is you take your whetstone, you put it in some water, and you wait for it to stop bubbling. That way you know that it's actually soaked up as much water as it can physically hold. Depending on the type of whetstone, you either hold it in your hand and move it across the blade if it's small enough, or if it's one of the round tubular ones, which are often called cigar stones, which I'm actually thinking about getting one of those because they look pretty handy for using like on the go and that kind of thing. This particular stone is definitely not an on the go kind of deal. Put your water on the floor, because we're actually going to need that in a bit, because every now and then you're going to want to rinse off the stone some. You want to take your sickle and you're actually going to move the blade along the whetstone, not towards the edge, but away from the edge. So the actual motion I'm going to be doing, I'm going to hold the stone up here so you can actually see, is as I sharpen it, it's going to move in kind of this motion. Move it at about a 45-degree angle. That's generally about what the bevel is on the edge. And then slide it up the stone like that. Based on all of the tutorial videos that I've watched, they talk about how there's like a sweet spot for the sound you can hear when you're really catching the edge properly. It's not as loud, apparently. You're not catching like the full edge, the full body of the blade, but it's also not grinding the edge. It's like right at the correct angle. We're gonna try that right now, and we're gonna see if we can kind of hear the difference. So I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna put a little bit of pressure on the outside of the blade with my thumb, and I'm going to not press into it, but just kind of hold it there steady as I move it. And we are going to slide it along flat, and we're going to see how that sounds. So sliding it flat against the stone, I don't know how well you can hear that with the microphone. I hope really well. Otherwise, all of this is going to be a waste, and I'm going to have to trash it. If you do it up toward the edge, it's going to be much louder. That would be like this. Okay? But we want to keep it at the 45-degree angle, which I think would be about here, if I'm guessing right. And that would sound like, I'm not gonna lie, I can't hear a difference. This hasn't seen like extremely heavy use. I mean, I've been using a ton of it out in the yard, but it's not like I've been using it for months and months without sharpening. I have been periodically going over the whetstone with this to try to actually keep it as sharp as I can. It's just every now and then I will notice as I'm working out there, it starts taking considerably more effort to get through the grass. I find myself hitting the same spot like 5 or 6 times as opposed to the usual 3 or 4, which I know I'm working on my technique. I'm still kind of new at this, but physically that does make a difference. It does actually kind of add up after a while. But a quick sharpening of it tends to make it where it slices like butter right through there again. Butter is a strange thing to bring up when you're discussing cutting grass. I'm just gonna do probably between 15 and 20 on this side. Then I would do between 15 and 20 on the other. And we're starting to get a little bit dry, so this is the part where you get your water. You just get a little bit moist again. The water doesn't just keep the stone clean and help the dust and stuff and the metal shavings actually come off of the stone itself, but the water also apparently helps the stone keep from wearing down quite as quickly and extends the life of it, which is pretty cool, pretty handy. I do see some nicks toward the pointy end right here. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to work those out all that easily. It's going to take some time. Those are because I actually broke the tip off. I got a little bit too close to a paving stone out in the backyard and it just chipped right off, which is one of the hazards of using tools made out of Japanese steel. It tends to be higher carbon, which means you can keep a sharper edge on it, but it also makes the metal itself more brittle and more prone to break like that. So, as with most things in life, there's always a bit of a trade-off with it. You just have to kind of decide if you think it's worth it. I do actually think it's worth it. You know, we aren't actually looking all that bad. We also aren't looking all that good. Dad humor from someone with no interest in having kids. If you by any chance work for the manufacturer of this particular set of sharpening stone, and I am sure that you will recognize your own handiwork. You see it from the side. Yeah, look at that, real handy. But anyway, if you recognize your company's handiwork and you would like to extend an offer to me, pay me. I will happily show your sharpening stones. As long as you're willing to have somebody who has less than a couple of hours practice using them on anything. You know, I can't imagine there's a lot of celebrity endorsements for sharpening stones, so you guys should be plenty desperate. I got student loans to pay off. Ain't cheap. Yeah, I actually did a pretty good job working the nicks out on that end. There's still a slight little divot, and maybe if I put a little more, maybe if I give it a few more runs, I could completely clean it off, but I'm actually okay with it like it is right now. Not because I'm lazy, which I am, but largely because some of the videos I was watching, the tutorials, were talking about how if there is a little bit of roughness to the edge, it does a better job of catching the grass and actually catching it and cutting through it, as opposed to sort of pushing it over. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I'm going to give that a shot and see if there's any appreciable difference with it. For the kitchenware, I'm going to use something a little bit on the finer side. This is 3000 grit and 8000 grit on the other side. We're going to start with 3000 grit naturally, the tougher grit, and then move to the finer grit. But before we do that, this stone is dry, which is no good. So, to show you what exactly it does, here is the container, as you can see. I'm going to take the stone, I'm going to put it in, and there we go. Can't tell if you can really see how it's doing, but it is bubbling away right now. Just the fizziest of rocks. I didn't actually intend to record a video tonight to start sharpening like the sickle and the knives and all that. It's just, I'm trying to quit smoking right now, and it's really hard. I have actually been smoking for about 15 years, give or take. And yeah, it's tough to quit. It's really hard to quit. That puff of smoke you saw me do earlier, don't worry, that wasn't tobacco. No, it was hemp. I actually bought these little hemp cigarettes because the idea is there's no nicotine in them, but it has a similar motion that smoking always has. You take it out of the pack, you put it in your mouth, you light it up. I'm hoping that still having that muscle memory sort of will help me get through part of the psychological aspect as I work through the actual physical nicotine addiction, which is, again, super tough. Guys, don't ever start smoking. Some of the symptoms of nicotine withdrawal, which happens when you quit smoking, is hot flashes, fantastic, like I'm going through menopause, intense cravings to smoke, which, yeah, of course, as well as insomnia. I'm sure if you watched my other videos and you've seen the state of the bags under my eyes, it's pretty obvious I don't get a lot of sleep as it is. By the way, this is being filmed in North Florida in late July of 2020, and things are bad. The plague is picking up. There's discussions of reopening schools next month, which is going to be a horrible idea because it's going to instantly transform every child in the state to a disease vector who will then infect their family, and their family will infect everyone around them and their coworkers. And I'm seriously worried that we're going to hit a point where I'm terrified we're going to hit a point where just about everybody in the state has it. And it's not smart to have a decade and a half of smoking under your belt when an extremely virulent respiratory disease starts spreading around the world that we have no idea how to cure yet, and has been linked not just to killing people. There's about a 4% mortality rate as far as we know right now. It's also been linked to permanent organ damage, tissue scarification in lungs, as well as, in some cases, people have experienced kidney and liver failure with it. There have been rumors of it actually crossing the blood-brain barrier, but I haven't been able to verify it. As I mentioned before, I have insomnia, so I naturally read up on all the things that will definitely make sure I will never fall asleep again, because that's how my brain works. This is an awful disease that originally started spreading because rich people didn't want to put off going on vacation. The initial cases that came out of China, when it initially spread to Europe, France and whatnot, it was because of wealthy Chinese socialites who wanted to go eat at fancy restaurants and didn't want to miss out on the chance to have a vacation, which then of course became wealthy people in Europe getting infected with it who didn't want to miss out on their vacations, and they traveled all over the world spreading this disease. And then many of them came to the United States, these rich people who didn't want to put off their vacation and spread it even more. Until we finally hit a point where Florida, where I live, is the world epicenter. The highest rate of infection. And within a couple of weeks, we're likely to have the highest rate of death. We're looking at likely tens of thousands dead in Florida alone by the end of this year. And odds are good there's going to be a fair few number of people I know. And it's horrifying. We're being blamed for the spread of it now. Despite the fact the workers aren't the reason the disease spread past China. The workers are not the reason the disease spread all over the globe within a few weeks. It was the wealthy, the rich. With the police riots that are going on right now on top of this plague, with Portland basically being treated like a hostile city with federal troops occupying it and brutalizing the inhabitants, by the way, violating every single one of the Bill of Rights, like all of them. It's kind of impressive. Well, I take that back. I'm not sure they're violating the bit about not being forced to quarter troops, but it's a bit of a gray area right now. I'm sure I could make an argument that they already have. But the point being, things are bad. But I look around and so many people seem very blasé about it, and I have to ask, Why aren't you angrier? Aren't you pissed off? This disease shouldn't be spreading like this. The conditions we live with shouldn't be like this. Humanity, as a species, has produced enough food since 1997 every year to feed 10 billion people. There aren't 10 billion people alive right now. We're only at, I think, just shy of 8 billion. So we have enough food that we can grow to feed everyone. And not just feed them, make everybody fat. Because it's more than enough calories for them to consume. But do we? No, we don't. Because it's not profitable. And because it doesn't turn a profit, millions of people die every year. We've got more than enough money and more than enough wealth and know-how to end homelessness. The cost of ending homelessness in the United States is $20 billion. Fucking Jeff Bezos made $13 billion yesterday. Take a day and a half of what he makes and boom. Homelessness? Not an issue anymore. And by the way, it cost about 10 times that to not give everybody a home and continue dealing with homelessness as we currently are. We are actually wasting money and spending extra money just to be cruel. Why are you not angrier? A study that came out in the early 90s surveyed a bunch of law enforcement families and found that 40% of them reported being domestically abused by the officer and the family. Those reports were made to law enforcement agencies, and the officers in question faced no consequences, kept their jobs, and were protected by the police union, which all of the officers pay dues into, which means every single law enforcement officer in this country supports and perpetuates domestic violence and is willing to lie so that violent abusers can keep qualified immunity and keep their guns and stay on the streets to brutalize the rest of us. Because there are many studies linking the escalation of domestic violence eventually to murder. Well, the stone seems to have soaked enough, so let's go ahead and put it on the base, and then I'll start working on some of those kitchen knives. Why aren't you angrier? Where is your rage? Where is your disgust? We're being killed by the thousands. 68,000 people per year die of preventable deaths in the United States because we don't have universal health care. 68,000. This means the Democratic Party, the ones that are supposed to be the good guys, who pushed to keep the ACA as something that it's not universal and all that, you still have to pay into the insurance companies, and it maintained insurance company profits. In fact, not only maintained their profits, but made it to where their profits increased more than they ever had before because there was a penalty for not paying them for the pleasure of denying you coverage. The Democrats have ensured for the past 10 years that 68,000 people per year continue to die. Because the Democrats didn't want there to be universal health care. Didn't want there to be health care coverage. Vote blue, no matter who. That's always worked out in the past. There's simply so much voter suppression, so much being blocked, people having to wait 7-8 hours in line to actually vote in districts that are primarily Democrats, where Democrats have control, and yet they don't put in enough polling stations? Or they make it, in this case, during a plague, where it's a lot harder to vote by mail, and now the current president is saying he doesn't want to accept mail-in ballots and may not even accept the results of the election. And it begs the question, what exactly is voting supposed to do about that? How is voting supposed to help change the material conditions when it hasn't in pretty much 40 years? At no point in my lifetime has there been a year that wasn't economically and materially worse than the year that preceded it. This has been going on since before I was born. This isn't something I chose. This isn't something I got to vote on or decide. This is what people of my generation, my age, have been saddled with. That our parents chose, and our grandparents, and our aunts and our uncles, and our other older relatives. All because the relatives that could vote at the time didn't like the idea of paying more taxes. And certainly weren't fans of the idea of anybody whose skin tone was different than theirs moving into their neighborhoods. And one way to ensure that you're not going to have the kind of social mobility that will allow you to move into a middle-class neighborhood is to completely gut all the social safety nets so that the poor stay poor. So you end up with a permanent underclass of people who work but can't afford to feed their families, can't afford rent. All this because your Meemaw and Pawpaw didn't like the idea of neighbors who used more spices than salt and pepper in their food. When people talk about how bad boomers are and the decisions that they've made, it's not a generational thing. It is a class issue. Because a vast majority of baby boomers, the white ones at least, black, brown, and indigenous baby boomers, they've been getting fucked longer than the rest of us. They've been getting fucked their entire lives, and then some. Generationally, they've been getting fucked. It's been a fucking train of fucking going on. A human centipede of constant fucking. A fuck fest that has been happening for centuries, screwing them over. The white baby boomers, by and large, had enough money to be comfortable, to get everything they wanted out of life. Go ahead and spend that money on that fishing boat they had their eye on, or that ski-doo. To where they felt comfortable and they felt rewarded by the system. And as you have definitely borne witness to over the past several months, they're willing to sacrifice and kill all of us to maintain their comfort. They don't want to wear masks. They don't want to stay home. They don't want to socially distance. No. They want to go out and do whatever it is they want because they have spent nearly their entire lives never being told no. And almost always getting exactly what they want. They're comfortable. They're petty bourgeois. So when people talk about baby boomers and the problems with baby boomers, it's not ageism. It's a discussion about class. Still no moratorium on rent. Still no money or food programs to feed people. We've been food insecure since this started. Or rather, no money's been allocated for that. Trillions has been allocated to help out businesses and help them through these very trying times. Cruise companies have gotten hundreds of millions of dollars in bailout Despite the fact that cruise companies, they're not even based in the US. They're based in the Caribbean because it's a tax shelter. So, our oligarchy that runs the country, because make no mistake, we live in an oligarchy. This is not a democracy by any stretch of the means. This, honestly, the United States of America has never been a democracy. Because we have never had equal voting rights for everyone. The US has said it has. They wrote it on that fancy piece of paper that you can go and look at a museum. But in practice, it's never been true. It's always been groups that have been suppressed. Always been groups that they've made it impossible to have their voices heard. Because the United States is not a democracy. Never has been. It has always been an oligarchy. And the oligarchs who run everything, well, they've decided their personal businesses deserve the money to get through these trying times. And the rest of us, well, if we were so vital to the economy, we'd have our own businesses and we'd be rich too. So if 3-4% of the American population dies, which at the rate we're going, pretty much everybody in this country will be infected at one point or another. So that may probably happen. If 3 to 4% of us die, well, that's only 4 or 5 million. Still a passing grade. 96% of the country surviving. Who cares about a few million corpses? It does make another question run through my head. And it's a question I'm going to leave you with. Looking around at everything that's happening, looking at all the violence, all the death, all of which could easily be avoided. Every death from the plague, every person made homeless, every person bankrupted by this plague, avoidable. All of it doesn't need to happen. Every single one of them, their circumstances were enabled by both the Republicans and the Democrats. So you have to ask, what is to be done? Be safe out there. Wear a mask. There's a plague on.